Hello there, welcome back to linuxjobber.com where we prepare you for Linux jobs. My own name is Sean May Joseph and my email is showpopulos@gmail.com where today I'll be preparing you for Linux jobs. Today we'll be looking at the last part of our Ldap configuration. If you have been following the video, you would know that this is the last thing that we did. So we have explained everything from step 1 through step 5. So there have been 5 videos previous to this one here. If you have not seen those videos, I will show you where you will find those videos, and you need to watch those videos before you finally watch this one here. So now with this one here, with the last thing we did was to actually we set up our company, we set up our department, the groups, and then our users, right? I think I only set up one user, Jane. So for today's video, we would be looking at, let me show you where you find those videos first. So first of all, you go to our website at linuxjobber.com right here, and then you go to tutorials, you go to proficiency, and then when you get down to proficiency, you would go down to, let me see if I can find where those videos are. It's actually in 107 right here. So you click on the 2. Let me show you the one that I've already clicked on. So you click on the 2 and you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 videos that have already been that will show you how to configure LDAP correctly, and it breaks it down in such a way that anyone would easily understand it, and that's the whole point of making the videos for LDAP. As for today, the last part of the video would be to now connect the client to the servers. So we will be connecting the clients to these servers. So let's just say, for instance, let me see if I can bring up another. Um, so let me see if I can draw something very quickly to explain what we're trying to do. So what we have done so far with LDAP was to create an LDAP server, right? So this is our LDAP server that we created before. We spent all this time that we've been working on LDAP. You know what? Let me use color black because color red would be too would be too color red would be too. Let me use color black. Um, so here is the LDAP server that we created, and let me type in there so that you know it's the LDAP server. And then this is what we've done. We spent a lot of time creating this LDAP server, and now what we're going to do is that we're going to actually create a client that's going to connect to this server. So now let me create a client here that will connect to the server. So I go to home, I go here, I go here, and I draw another one. I'm trying to draw like a client, so this would pretty much be your laptop here or whatever else you're using that you're working on. And so you go to here, you go to here. All I'm just trying to do here is simulate a situation where you have a client, that's all. So it's not that complicated. And then let's just say you have like a router or something in between. Doesn't really matter what you have in between. It's just something that you use to connect the client and the LDAP server. So now you have a router. So let me just type router so you understand. And then I'm going to type client right here, right? So this is clients now. And remember one of the first videos that we made, I called this Joe PC, right? Let me type it in there, Joe PC. Joe PC. So what we're trying to do simply here is that we want to make this Joe PC a client. What does that really mean? That means that when Mr. Joseph comes to this computer and he wants to log on to this machine, he does not or he will not actually have a he does not or he will not actually have a username and password that exists on this server. His username and password will actually exist on this server right here. So if there's a user Jane, which I created here before. Now let me use green to represent Jane, right? So now let's just say, for instance, this is Jane right here. So let's just say, for instance, sometimes I lose my cursor, so bear with me. So sometimes, so let's just say we have this user Jane right here that I created in the last video, and this user Jane wants to log into this machine, Joe PC. User Jane does not have an account on this PC, but because of Ldap, user Jane will be able to log in. So, but before that is able to happen, we have to connect this Joe PC to the Ldap server the so that Joe PC can perform its authentication through the Ldap server, and that's what we're trying to do. And the same thing is what I have up here. I have up here in this video here, Joe PC. This is the client, Ldap client. Now let me connect them together just so that you see what we're trying to do. So what I'm trying to do at this point is I'm going to connect this Joe PC to the um, through the router to the Ldap server on port 686. Right? Remember we configured port 686 the last time we met. This is 686, right? Let me type it up in here. 686. And once I have connected it, then you would be able to it's a port number, so I'm just going to put an arrow there so that you know it's a port number, and that's where Ldap is listening. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to start connecting Joe PC, and actually it's going to be a machine called Linux Jobber. I'm going to use a machine called Linux Jobber for Joe PC, and then let me just type it in there so that you know what I'm actually using and what I'm connecting to. So here I'm going to use a machine. Let me use green so that you can see it. I'm going to use a machine called Linux Jobber for this .com, and I'm going to use a machine called file server, which I've already done this part here, file server.linuxjobber.com. So it's that simple, and let's go ahead and get that started. So all right, let me go ahead and get that started. So as you can see, I have the two machines up. This is the file server up here, which is my Ldap server, and then this is the Linux Jobber here, which is going to be the client. And now I'm going to connect this client here, the Linux Jobber machine, and I'm going to connect it to the DNS server, which is called file server. So here's how I'm going to connect it. Let me get started with my steps. There are a number of things that we have to do. First, we have to make sure that the client has the correct packages that it needs to connect. Otherwise, it will not be able to connect. So we have to do yum. We have to install OpenLDAP clients, right? Because remember, this thing is a client, and it doesn't need the OpenLDAP server package. It only needs the client package. Now, the SSSD is what it would use to get the client information, the user information from the servers. So now I use this, and it's going to download this, and it won't take long because it's just one package, the OpenLDAP server, and it's going to bring down its dependence, and it should not take long. As you can see, it's finished, and now it's done. It's trying to update now. It's going to do all of this, and it's going to install, and then it's done. And right after that is done, as I told you in one of the previous videos, I explained to you that the the configuration file that we actually need on the client is actually the ldap.conf file, right? There's a file in etc open ldap, and it's called ldap.conf file, right? That's what needs to be configured. So pretty much when you download this package, it creates that ldap.conf file into the client. So now let me show you the file. So I'm going to do vi etc open ldap.conf. See that file? That's what the clients need to operate. So now that we know the file that we need. Let me blow up my machine so you can really see what I'm doing. So now I open the machine, I open the server. If you remember, we also configured this particular um, file for the server, and that's because a server, even though it's gonna help others with LDAP, it has to help itself also, and that was the reason we configured it for that one server. But now we have to go ahead and configure it for the clients, and that's where we're at now. We're going to configure it for the clients. Now I'm going to tell the client to SSL. I'm going to tell it to start TLS, right? So that when it connects, it's going to connect with security. Now I'm going to also tell it the TLS. Make sure you request certificate, right? And you allow the certificate, right? TLS, let me do the request certificate, request cert. So then I'm going to tell it to allow it, right? Now, remember with our base that I talked about before, which is up here. In this case here, I'm going to say base, if I can type correctly, um, base, and I'm going to say our base is dc equal to linuxjobber.com, but in with LDAP you have to say linuxjobber domain component equal to linuxjobber, comma domain component equal to com. That's how it is written, even though this truly means linuxjobber.com. So when you say base in LDAP, you are pretty much saying our domain. So in this case, our domain is linuxjobber.com. And to see the extent of our domain, to see what it covers, you need to watch the first video in this series. So now, the URI, right? Remember this URI in the, I think the fourth video, it gave us a problem. And the reason it gave us a problem is because this machine must be able to resolve whatever name you put in here. And this is where a lot of people get into problems, because this file server .linuxjobber.com, if this local client now, this Joe PC, in my case linuxjobber.com computer, if it cannot resolve this name, you will get problems. So you have to make sure that first of all it must be able to resolve that name, because otherwise it will not be able to find that server, file server.linuxjobber.com. So the first thing I'm going to do is save this file and go and make it understand the name fileserver.linuxjobber.com. And I already know the IP address. So see, because I know the IP address, I can do one of two things. I can go and put it into the DNS and make sure that it can resolve it, or I can put it into the etc host file. But before I do all of that, let's see whether this machine already knows this um, file server, whether it can resolve it. And as you can see, ping says unknown host. So if you do try to do anything with this name here, linuxjobber, fileserver.linuxjobber.com, you will always get an error. Nothing will work correctly. So the first thing we need to do is vi the etc host file. And once you vi this, you can then um, say 141 is our Linux, it's our file server, right? File server. And let me change this to file server. In the meantime, I'm going to change this. Don't worry about what I'm doing here. This is just because the IP address changed up there. I'm just changing it, but it really doesn't affect what we're doing here. What's important that we have done here is that we have made this machine, we have told it how to resolve linuxjobber fileserver.linuxjobber.com. So if we do a ping now it can't ping. Now it knows who we're talking about, and this is extremely important to us, because otherwise everything we are configuring will never work correctly. So now that we have done that, the next thing we're going to do, I'm trying to find a sweet spot to put mine. All right, the next thing we're going to do is that we're going to start doing the copying of the certificates. But we don't need to copy the certificates because it's going to find it automatically. So in this case, we're going to suspend the copying of certificates, right? And then we're going to create the SSD.com file. Now, I told you that the way that the LDAP client understands the users is with the SSD package. So for the SSD package to work correctly, we have to configure it. So let's go into the SSD folder in the configuration area and go to sssd.conf file, SSD. Okay, it's not there. So we would have to make sure that it's there and it exists. And the way that I'm going to make sure that it's there and it exists is that I'm going to start auth config. So I'm going to start the auth config, right? So when I start auth config, um, do I want to cache information? You could if you want to. There's nothing wrong with it, but I won't do it. For now, I would just use Ldap and use uh, shadow password MD5. Oh yeah, use shadow password. Use the MD5. Use Ldap authentication and local is sufficient. Local is not sufficient. Local authorization is okay. It's okay if you want local users to be able to log onto this machine. So now I will go to next, use TLS, that's important, and then the server. Where did it go? Let's see. Okay, this is where you specify that server, that LDAP server that we've been talking about, and you have to specify your LDAP server, otherwise it will not know what to do. And then your base domain DC equal to Linux Java. All of these things you have seen before. DC equal to com. So nothing new here. And you hit OK. To connect to the LDAP server with TLS protocol enable, you need a certificate. So it says to copy the certificate to this folder here. So remember we made a certificate, which is in this case now the certificate is the agent that we have sitting on our LDAP server, and it says to copy it to this directory here. You can see there, I cannot highlight it, but you can see it, and then press OK. So I'm going to press OK now, and so now as you can see, the SSD um, folder has just appeared now. It's right here now. So I am going to VI into that file. I did not copy yet that certificate that it told us to copy, which is pretty much our, like I said, is the agent that we put on the server. I did not copy it because I have some things that's going to change over here, right? And one of the things that's going to change, I will show you. Um, Let me figure out those things that are going to change. So some of the things are going to change. That's why I didn't copy it yet, but I will copy it eventually. Um, so one thing we have to put over here, if you wanted to find the LDAP users, you have to do enumerate equal to true. If you don't do that, for some reason, it will not find the user. So you always have to put that in there. Cache credentials, if you want to, you can have it cache credentials. This is correct. Actually, there's an S here, right? There's an S here because we're using TLS. And if you don't, maybe I typed it incorrectly when I typed it in. Maybe that's why. Now I am not using CA certs, and those are the changes that I wanted to make sure that I have down, because if you don't have those changes down, what happens is that if you will get you wouldn't be it wouldn't be able to connect as it should. So here's what you need. And I think I'm done with the configuration at this point. I'm going to run the LDAP configuration again. I'm going to restart it. And once I restart it, I will. Okay, so let me restart it. So when I once I run it, once I rerun it, you know what? Instead of doing, I'm going to rerun it, but I will do an update instead of config. Let me do an update instead, right? Um, okay, finish typing that, and now, so now that I've run it, now let's start the testing. Let's make sure that we find all the things that we're supposed to find. So to do the testing now, the first thing that I will do is that I'll go back to my sssd.conf and make sure that I have all of my values set correctly. So now, remember I told you that I will put the enumerate equal to true, and I did that. Now, one thing I added here is the Ldap TLS request certificate to never. Why do I set this to never? Because I already requested certificate in connecting to the Ldap server from the Ldap client. So I'm already using in the open etc open ldap.com file. I'm already using certificate to connect to this Ldap server. So I don't need another certificate to um, collect the user's credentials. So for that reason, I'm going to set this to never. Now, AutoFS provider, this we would use when we worry about auto file systems, but not right now. Cache credentials, this is very important, right? And the reason that this is important is because you need to know what it does. If you cache credentials, that means that your local client, Joe PC in this case, will store the user's directory. So let's say, for instance, I said user's directory, I'm sorry, the user's information. So let's say, for instance, now Jane wants to come back and log into this machine, but the Ldap server is not available. So let me type that down so that you see what I'm talking about. It makes sense that way. So now Jane comes here and wants to log in. Remember that Jane has no account on this machine. Jane's account is completely on the server. If Jane comes back here and the server is not available because there's a problem with the router, what's going to happen is that Jane is not going to be able to log into the machine. So in that case, if Jane is not able to log into this machine, then Jane is going to say, okay, there's a problem, and Jane is going to complain. Now, if we use Ldap cache credentials, now Jane's information is going to get cached on Joe PC, so that the next time Jane comes to log on, it does not matter whether or not the Ldap server is available. Jane will always be able to log into Joe PC. Now that's the reason for that one. Let me remove this. So if the server becomes unavailable, let's say the router crashed for whatever reasons, Jane's information will be available locally on the Ldap client. That's why we use the cache credentials. So I'm done explaining that. I'm going to move to the next one. The KRB5 we don't need, right? The search base, you already know, our domain. Even though they call it, I don't know why Ldap has so many different names, but just know that this means the domain name. Now, the ID provider, we're only telling the Ldap, collect ID from here. Don't take the ID locally on Joe PC. Take the ID from the Ldap server. And the same thing with the auth provider, meaning authentication. Don't authenticate on this Joe PC. Authenticate on the Ldap server. That's what that means. So now let's go back there. So now the ID provider, the auth provider, we've done. Now this I'm not going to worry about because I'm not even going to use it. So the Ldap URI, I've told you this and I've given you the example before. and this means the LDAP server. You can type in the domain name right here, fileserver.linuxjava.com, but I used the name. I should change that, right? But anyway, I'm leaving that alone for now. Now use start here. Let's set that to true. Now, again, this is not important because when the client tries to connect to the, let me see if I have the information here. Okay, hold on, I think I have it. When the client tries to connect to the LDAP server, it will go to the certificate authority and get the location of this agent here anyway. So there's no point in specifying it in the sssd.conf file. We're not going to use it here. We're only going to use the one that's specified in the ldap.conf, and even then it's not stored locally. So that's all you need for that one. If you look at this, you'll see this is all you need. I'm not going to touch anything inside SSSD. It only has 3 configurations. Domains, take the default. Configuration file version 2. Services, use NSS, use PAM, use AutoFS. That's all it's saying. So now let's go and do the testing before we run out of time. All right, so let me write it and quit it. Right? So now I'm going to then, first of all, I'm going to, let me look for my command here, history, grep, ldap, search, right? Commands that I've used before. All right, so I'm going to grab this command here, use ldap search to search the entire domain to see if I have my domain configured correctly, if I can reach the server. So I'm just saying to the machine now, give me what's inside the server. As you can see, it gives me everything inside the server, right? It gives me all of the information that we put in inside the server. Remember the linuxjava.com that we put in? Remember the organizational unit? Remember the group? Remember the user agent that we created? That's all it is. It gives us that information. Now, you can use any of these uh, commands that I've used up there before, but I'm not going to spend so much time on that. Now, the other one that I would like to show you that's important is this one here. Right? So now, all I'm doing is that I'm going to say to the machine, I want to use password. So if I do this, that means I'm logging in as user Showpopulous, the admin, and you will see the value of that one at a different time. In this case, you have to specify the same information, but you just have to specify the admin password. And look at the information up here, look at the information down here, and it gives you the differences. Look at that, right? Look at that, and which you don't get up here, right? And you'll see the other differences at a different time. So now, before we run out of time, it's 28. So now, the most important test is to do the get end to make sure that we can connect, to make sure that we can access user Jane. Look at that, we have user Jane's information. So we check the password file to make sure that we can get the user Jane's password file. And the next one that we have, so once we have been able to successfully switch to that user, then the next thing will be, we have successfully ensured that the user's account is available. Then we're going to switch to that user Jane. See, we have been able to successfully switch to that user Jane, and you can see there's an error here, right? It's saying that user Jane's home directory is not available. Now, this is a problem we'll have to fix in the next video. It's not an LDAP video, but it's one of the file server and creating home directories. So that's a completely different area of Linux, and we will be fixing this problem here. But this is how it's done. Thank you very much for watching the LDAP videos. I know it took about 6 videos to complete this series, but you definitely get the benefit of it. Thank you very much. Have a nice one. My email is showpopulous@gmail.com. Send me questions if you have any. Thank you.